All right, what's good, everybody? Welcome back to Chopping It Up with PScott. I'm PScott Kelly. Today is Sunday, December 3rd. Glad to have you back with us. It's my pregame show. So what are we going to do? Talk the betting spreads. What should the Bears do with Justin Fields? The playoff picture. Caleb Williams, is he really in or out? Mark Cuban selling his stock with the Dallas Mavericks. Coach of the year, MVPs, whatever you want to talk about. Throw in the group chat and we'll get to it this morning because the early games are going to start in about an hour. So what I want to do is start with PScott's picks so we can get all you degenerate gamblers in right away and get those lines in before the games start. You can follow us on Apple Podcast, Spotify, and YouTube. YouTube page is starting to blow up, and by blow up I mean we doubled our audience, which doesn't mean a whole lot because there wasn't a whole lot to begin with. But the people who did subscribe, I appreciate it. Click that bell, click the like, share, subscribe. Tell your friends, hide your kids, hide your wives, and let's get in to today's episode. So PScott's picks, like I said, I want to start there first because, like I said, the games are going to lock up in about an hour. So if you're watching this live, either through Facebook or through YouTube, I want to make sure I get my points to you guys as soon as possible. I forgot. We got to get the PScott's picks music going because I forgot I had that. Yeah, it's been a minute since we did PScott's picks, so let's get into it. Now, this is a 5-game parlay. What's going to happen is this is basically a plus 2,500 odds. So if you throw $100 on this 5-game parlay and it hits, you're going to get $2,500, all right? First off, Houston Texans are -3 against the Denver Broncos. The Broncos have been on a 5-game win streak. They look really good, but let's be serious. Russ is still averaging like less than 200 yards per game during that stretch, and the defense has been bonkers. They've turned the ball over a lot, like 17, 18 times in the 5-game period. That doesn't seem sustainable to me, especially since CJ Stroud just doesn't turn the ball over that much. Houston -3. I'm taking them against the Denver Broncos. Next, Pittsburgh Steelers, Arizona Cardinals. The Steelers are currently, well, when I locked this in yesterday, the Steelers were -6.5 against the Cardinals. I'm taking the Steelers -6.5. Kyler Murray has done just enough to still like kind of keep his job, if you will, with Arizona. But even then, like the Cardinals are tanking perfectly, making it look like Kyler Murray still has some draft value or some trade value, excuse me. But I feel like they're going to try to trade him in the offseason, but they're doing it exactly right. Letting him be good, get his stats, be competitive, and then still take the L's. Because they might be in that Caleb Williams sweepstakes, and we'll talk about that a little bit later. But Pittsburgh, without having Matt Canada kind of handcuffing them now, it does feel like the offense has opened up. I don't want to overreact over one game, but Pittsburgh's defense is ridiculous. And if you're giving me 6.5, I don't know if Arizona could even put up enough points to be able. You're telling me that they can put up like 14 or 17? I don't think so. Pittsburgh -6.5. Next, the Miami Dolphins are 8.5-point favorites against the Washington Commanders. I'm taking Miami -8.5. Waddle's playing, Hill's playing, A-Chain's playing, Mostert's playing. This thing could be a boat race. It could get ugly. But most of the time in the NFL, when you think that one thing is going to happen, something else does. So this one I'm actually kind of skittish about. But with everything back in full force, that much speed and that much weaponry with Miami, I'm taking the Dolphins -8.5. Next, the Cleveland Browns +4 against the Los Angeles Rams. That defense in Cleveland is no joke. They're stupid. They're bonkers. It's a top 5 defense in the NFL. The Rams, Nakua's been great. Kupp is back, but they both kind of got shut down last week. I'm not saying it's going to necessarily transfer over, but cool Joe Flacco is starting this week. We don't know what he's got in the tank. I don't expect Cleveland to win this game, but +4, you might get a little bit of that Flacco magic, right? Because that 4 is just enough to entice me. So I got the Browns +4 against the Rams. Next, we have Chiefs against the Packers, and the Chiefs are -6. They are 6-point favorites. I'm taking the Chiefs. That defense is really good. I don't trust Green Bay. Jordan Love has had some pretty good games over the past 2 or 3 weeks or so, but it's still Mahomes. That defense is ridiculous. I'm going to go ahead and take the Kansas City Chiefs at -6. So again, if you take the Texans -3, Steelers -6.5, Dolphins -8.5, Browns +4, and Chiefs -6. If you run that to a T and they all hit, it's plus 2,500. Get a little coin in your pocket for the weekend. All right. So moving on. There's been a lot of speculation, like what should the Bears do with Justin Fields in the offseason? And one thing that I've always kind of said to myself is, whatever you're going to do, you need to be fully committed to it, especially when it comes to the world of sports. We're going to go off on a little bit of a tangent real quick. But I've always said when it comes to head coaches, GMs, whatever you say in your initial press conference is the way that you kind of need to address the rest of your season and how you actually need to handle business. So if you go into this and you say, everybody's up for sale, my job is to get the best out of who we've got on this roster, but if they're not on this roster, I need to pivot and go a different way. If you say that up front, I think that you have a little bit more, you have more credibility when you keep it in that perspective, right? But if you say, we want to do that, but then keep the weakest link on your team, you're not being honest with you, your fan base, or anybody else in between. Same thing with guys like Dave Gettleman. We're not going to trade Odell Beckham Jr. Next thing you know, he's out. And we see this all the time in professional sports. So that's kind of the reason why I'm saying whatever you want to do, stay committed to it and be that person, though. So when it comes to Chicago, you shouldn't oversimplify this. There's a really good chance that you could have the number 1 overall pick, the number 1, 3, 1 and 4, 1 and 2, maybe. It just depends. But what I would do is if I'm Chicago, I'm looking at this from the angle of if Justin Fields progresses to what we think that he can be, we trade the number 1 pick up Marvin Harrison Jr., get him another weapon. But the number 1 pick, we can move on from. If he doesn't, then we keep it and we draft Caleb Williams or Drake May, right? It doesn't seem like it should be that difficult. But all too often we see teams they kind of want to outsmart themselves. They want to think more than they actually need to do, which Chicago has had a tendency to do in the years past. There's a guy named Mitch Trubisky. And I will say this, I've defended Bears fans and that organization for one reason only, is because the biggest whiff was you trade up to get him, because that was the same draft with Patrick Mahomes. But there was 8 other teams that missed on Mahomes. So it's not just a Bears thing. So that one I kind of give you guys a pass. It's trading up to get him. That was the real Neanderthal move. But with Chicago, you just have to simplify it down to, if we think that Fields is the guy, we trade. If we still think that we can get Marvin Harrison Jr., because you might have to take him with the number 1 overall pick, just depending on how the draft shakes out. If you like Fields enough, you keep him, you move some of the capital, but make sure that you get Marvin Harrison Jr. If you don't like what you have, then you trade Justin Fields in the offseason. You take Caleb Williams or Drake May, whoever you like more, with the 1st overall pick. Then you might still be able to get Marvin Harrison Jr. Who knows? I'm hoping that Justin Fields goes to a place like Atlanta, because Atlanta does have good running back, good skill. They have good skill position guys. Their quarterback play is just, it's just absolute dog. And what Chicago has proven is that they are willing to throw the football. Now, obviously, there's one play I'm trying to give Justin Fields a little bit more leeway, because I understand that the weaponry in Chicago isn't necessarily all that good. And you kind of get happy feet, you start to get the jitters. But I remember a play, it was like 2 weeks ago, trying to hit Darnell Mooney as he was running across the field and just laid that dude out for murder. Like, Darnell Mooney got absolute mollywopped because he overshot him. And it's like, dude, you got to get that under control. But I also understand that playing quarterback in the NFL is hard. If you don't have the line protection and you don't have the weapons, it makes you second guess yourself. Justin Fields looks a lot like Josh Allen to a degree his first 2 years. So if I'm Chicago, Just don't overreact, but simplify it down to two things. If he's what you think he is or what he could be, keep him and move one of those spots. If he's not, then move him. But you don't have to overthink this and say, well, if he has this many touchdowns and like this completion percentage, no, it's either yes or no. He's the guy or he's not. I just wouldn't put too much stock into it and overthink this. It's a pretty simple decision in my book. All right, so moving on. I was thinking about this the other day because I remember when Lamar Jackson had his MVP season, and I started thinking, well, is anybody ever going to reach 10,000 rushing yards from the quarterback angle? And the way that this is lined out, because I want to do some research on this, Lamar Jackson has over 5,000 rushing yards, and he's only like what 5 or 6 years into his career. 82 career games for Lamar Jackson, 5,000 rushing yards. Michael Vick is the all-time leader at 6,100 and played 143 games. Now, I understand that Vic had, he spent 2 years away and also missed a lot of games. Not even just because of the jail time, but also like getting reacclimated to the NFL, was on a bunch of different teams. So those things happen. I understand that. He might have been able to get to that 10,000 yard mark had he played his entire career, but that isn't the story that was written. But Lamar Jackson is only 200 yards away from Russell Wilson and 600 yards away from Cam Newton. So by the end of next season, Lamar Jackson most likely will be the all-time rushing leader for a quarterback. And you can miss me with the whole RB1 thing. That joke's old. It's not funny. Get more creative, internet. You're better than this. But looking at, could he potentially get to 10,000 yards? With his MVP season, I thought maybe he can. But with him being at 5,000 right now and being 5-6 years into his career, at some point in time, you start to kind of take the legs away from a quarterback. The Bills have kind of done that with Josh Allen. His first 2 years, they ran him into the ground. Then they get Stephon Diggs. Then they start throwing it more. They're still using him, but not to the degree that they used to. And that's kind of what I'm thinking about with Lamar. Is that going to be the case? Now, they've tried to draft wide receivers over the past few years. They try to get him more skill position guys. They haven't always worked out. And now Mark Andrews is down for the rest of the year. It's going to be a tough sledding for the Ravens going forward. But if we're just sticking to the context of can he be the first quarterback to get to 10,000 rushing yards, I do think that he can, because when you look at getting to 1,000 yards is basically just 60 yards per game. And with the additional game now, it's like 55, 56. I think he's going to get to 10,000. We thought that it was impossible for a quarterback to get to 10,000 yards on the ground. I think that man is absolutely going to do it. So, what should we move on to next?